Good. How are you?
All right.
Hello, hello.
Yes, yeah, that's revised. That's in the one that was here, is in the one that was on the table is in there.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. I call the 29th meeting of the Madawaska School Committee to order. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Have a moment of silence.
Yeah, and you should have an adjusted agenda in front of you with some blue writing under items of business, new business, item C. We need to add approval of spring coaches specific to the varsity tennis coach. That one wasn't listed in your set of coaches. And then under items of business, new business, add an item E to follow the budget workshop. It'll be a motion to enter into executive session to discuss labor contract negotiations between the Madawaska School Department and the Madawaska Professional Educators Association.
Thank you. Anybody here to speak on any items of the agenda? Approval of the 28th meeting on March 1st. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll move. Yeah, I'll move, Tammy.
Robert seconds. Any questions, comments?
Yeah, I guess last time we had this meeting, we discussed some of the students' survey. I'm not sure if with the students there, I'm not sure if Mr. Anderson is in the audience too, if they have any additional updates or feedback that they want to share from that survey that was done and the action items from it.
So yes, the students are here and Mr. Anderson is here, Robert.
So I don't know if they have anything that they'd like to share. Positives, negatives, don't be shy.
Yeah, right now we're still on Zoom. We're both online. I'm going back maybe next week, and I don't know when. I'm going back fourth quarter. Yeah. So I don't know if anything has changed. No one really came to me complaining. I don't know. We're still online, so I know there was like each grade had an activity day for half the quarter, and I guess that really went well. The junior class was today, and they seemed to enjoy it. They're in the library and. Even freedom, I guess. So I guess that worked well.
Did you have anything more specific, Robert, or?
No, I just wanted just a general comment if there was any from the students or Mr. Anderson. But if they have none, that's fine too.
Anyone else? We have a motion, we have a second. All those in favor?
That's yes for Robert.
Yep. Approval of the financial statement, the February financial statement. Do I have a motion to approve the February financial statement? Nick moves. Do I have a second? Mindy seconds. Any comments, questions?
It's 66%, right? Is that where we should be at?
Yeah, we're right along. Yeah.
Yeah, we're right along those in that line, Robert.
All those in favor?
So Tim is supposed to join us Zoom. I don't see him in the waiting room. So maybe we can skip this item, and when I see him,
okay,
we'll come back to it.
Sure, that's fine. So we'll move into your section.
First thing I have under superintendent is just some news and updates. Just wanted to let you all know vaccination information. Every staff member that wanted a vaccination has received their first shot. It's been available to everyone, and no one has had an issue getting an appointment. Our numbers are relatively high. Not a whole lot of staff that have opted not to get vaccinated, which is so now we're just in a waiting pattern for full vaccination from the second dose, and the majority of people will be getting their second dose starting late next week into the following week, and 14 days after that we'll have full vaccination from the majority of our staff. There's been some adjustments in the gathering limits for the DOE, or actually it's the governor's gathering limits. They've adjusted just recently the 26th indoor gathering limits moved up to 50% capacity, and outdoor limits at 75% capacity. There's been some back and forth about what is an outdoor gathering limit, and the way they justify that is take how many people you normally would have at a soccer game and allow about 3/4 of that amount of people at a soccer game. Now, we're not in soccer season, but we will have baseball and softball coming up. I don't think we have anything to worry about with regards to capacity limits. For the schools themselves, it really doesn't provide a whole lot of flexibility, especially when eating is involved, because if your face mask is off, the 6-foot distancing still plays a role. So you can't really put that many students in one area with 6-foot distancing. But it will allow for, like I said, 50% capacity. So if Mr. Anderson's gym holds 400 people, he could have 200 people in the gym as long as they're 3 feet apart with face masks on. So it does allow for a little more gathering limits. That adjusts again, I believe May 24, I think, is the second adjustment period. And the outdoor limit is at 100%, and the indoor limit moves up to 75%. They had released some preliminary graduation updates a day before releasing these gathering limit updates. So it kind of nullified the graduation updates. So right now we don't have clear guidance on graduation, but we do know that if these numbers hold, we'll have a little more flexibility with the gathering surrounding graduation. So as soon as we know those, I'll update you. The last thing I have for updates from the department, I put a packet on your table that should say U.S. Department of Education fact sheet, American Rescue Plan, Act 2021. Last week we did receive a notification that per the American Rescue Act plan, Maine was receiving, I think it was upwards of $411 million out of the $122 billion assigned to schools federally. And from that, you'll be able to see in this information packet, the state itself gets to keep 10% of that for statewide initiatives, and then the other 90% goes out to the local school districts. This one's a little more specific in how you can use the money. On the second page, it says LEA use of ARP ESSER funds. In that opening statement, the school district must reserve at least 20% of the funds to address learning loss through implementation of evidence-based interventions and ensure that those interventions respond to students' social, emotional, and academic needs. This language was not in the previous CARES Act or ESSER funds, so they're targeting specific funds for a specific purpose. And then at the bottom, the remaining funds are pretty much as wide open as they've been with our previous allocations. So the last time we met, I did update you on ESSER 2, which is the current allocation that we have. And that was from the previous stimulus package. ESSER 2, we have about $470,000 to respond to the pandemic. This one right here, ESSER 3, Your allocation for Madawaska School Department is $972,239. Again, specific to the pandemic response. And the money will be used up until September 2023. So you get an extra year from ESSER 2. 2023 is the time that these funds must be spent. And you can go back to when the pandemic began, so we can target anything that was pandemic related, starting as early as March 2020. So right now, we met as an admin team this morning, and we're looking at putting projects together for ESSER 2, the previous pool of money. So we're not even talking yet about ESSER 3, just because we do have this initial allocation that we need to use to address our needs. Once the administration does provide their project proposals to us, we will then take them to you for your stamp of approval. Any questions on any of those?
Thank you, Ben.
You're welcome.
State assessment?
Yep, the state of Maine has officially entered a contract with the Northwest Education Assessment, what we know as NWEA. It's a test that we know well in this district as it has been used in the past for our progress monitoring tool. NWEA is a little bit different than what you probably know as a state assessment. In the past, a state assessment was a one-size-fits-all test given to every student of a grade level, and students were scored on it according to their success based on their peers. So if we were all in grade 3, we would all receive the grade 3 assessment, and we would get our scores based on that. NWEA is it's an intuitive test, and it basically grows with the student as they take it. So if I'm taking a math exam on the assessment, I get an answer wrong, the test will adjust itself to an easier question within the same domain, and then it'll calibrate based on where my learning is. So the state of Maine has moved to this design because what they want to do is essentially have students measured against themselves, growth over time, versus against other same age peers. The NWEA is a really good tool to do that. And they would like us to do a baseline assessment this spring, and then follow up with a beginning of the school year assessment in the fall, and then continue that pattern every year. So take a fall assessment, spring assessment, fall assessment, spring assessment, to see how students are doing. We have another tool in the district called STAR 360 that we use. STAR 360 will still be our local progress monitoring tool. It has a little bit more flexibility than NWEA, but NWEA will be our state assessment. The assessment window opens on April 19, and it's going to be open until the end of the school year. So right now the state is sending Vince some information on getting things ready. There's no cost to the district. In fact, districts that were using NWEA are getting reimbursed. We were not using NWEA anymore. We're using STAR. But for grades 3 to 8 and grade 11, those are the state assessment ages. We will have the assessment for free. The state will provide it to us.
We used NWEA once upon a time, though. It's been several years, though, right?
Yeah, it's been a couple of years since we moved away from it.
Okay.
Yeah, the feedback on NWEA when we were doing it is that it was more of a task to get NWEA done. It's a longer test than the STAR 360. And the STAR 360, you can actually test anytime. So I know at Madawaska Elementary, they're doing monthly snapshot assessments. Whereas NWEA was, you were locked into fall, winter, spring. And now with the state assessment, it's going to be just fall and spring. And we had to do a state assessment anyway, so it's not going to be additional testing.
So with this new testing, we're comparing the students against themselves.
Right.
At what point will we know where our students are as compared to state or national averages?
Well, I'm sure they're gonna use that as well, but the way they're telling it right now is that it's to measure students against themselves, especially right now with the pandemic impact. We wanna know where our kids fall. You're still gonna have the results to that are norm-based, so you're still gonna see, you know, this child, this falls at a grade 4 level or 4.2.
So they will still
You still
rank
say,
on that?
yeah, yeah.
You still want to, we don't want to lose sight of that.
No, you have to have that, and we do that with our STAR assessment as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just noticed that Tim is in the waiting room, so I'm gonna let him in.
Sure.
Hello, Tim, can you hear us? Hey, Tim, can you hear us?
Yes, how are you?
Very good. If you're ready, we're ready for you.
Okay, great. Glad Lucy gave me a reminder because I lost track of time here. So, yeah, let me just get my copy opened up here.
I have one on my desk.
All right, now I'm ready. So just as we usually do, I'll go through the financial statements. If you have any questions, jump in. There was nothing
Tim,
other than it being an unusual year. There
Can
was
you,
really nothing unusual
can
in
you share your screen,
financial
Tim?
statement. Oh, sorry, Rob.
Can you share your screen?
I can if they turn it on.
I will turn it on in a second.
Disabled by host.
Yeah, you're good now.
Thank you.
There we go. How's that?
Perfect. Thank you.
So let me minimize this so you can, there we go. So as I was saying, nothing unusual with the audit this year. Everything was in good condition as it usually is. The auditor's report is unmodified, states that your statements are presented in accordance with accepted accounting principles and Maine School Finance Act. So all is good there. Had a good increase in fund balance. Started the year with a fund balance of $792,262. Ended the year with a fund balance of $1,196,059. So had an increase in fund balance of about $400,000. Revenues of $7,735,000 and expenditures of $6,539,000. Of course, with it being an unusual year, you had budgeted expenditures of $700,000 or $7 million. Saw positive variances in transportation. The budget there was $651 and used $509, of course, with shutdowns occurring in March. So that last third of the year, quarter of the year, you saved on transportation and also planned operation that was budgeted at $1,035,000 and actual was $981,000. So positive variances in both those categories enabled you to generate that increase in fund balance. On the that's on the budgetary side. On the GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles side, we talk about this each year. You have your accrual for unfunded contracts, we call it. So with that variance, you still have a GAAP fund balance of $815,000. So that's positive as well. And then over on the right hand side here, adult education, nothing unusual. That's just a small fund balance under the year with a fund balance of $9,184. Beginning fund balance was $24,695. So you did actually bring the fund balance down on that side somewhat. So Any questions so far? No. Beginning on page 4, going through page 8 is the notes, the financial statements, just detail on what's in your financial statement. The only account per page 8 that was overexpended was special ed. Again, that's not unusual. Again, nothing real unusual in the notes of the financial statements. So that's fairly standard year to year. Your note on your report on compliance with Maine School Finance Act, again, I mentioned was unmodified. States that there were no compliance issues or anything we noted that was not in accordance with the Finance Act rules and regulations. Next section we looked at is school lunch. At the end of the year, you had subsidies receivable of 48,000, inventories on hand of about 8,900. So that was the 48,000 does go back to the town general fund, and the inventory is your fund balance at year end. A small increase in fund balance of about $941 on the school side, so that is running even, actually better than most years on the school side, thanks to the various subsidies and federal aid that they kicked in with the CARES Act and so forth to supplement the nutrition program, so kids could continue to get meals even through the stay-at-home orders. So that helped the school lunch side a lot. Our reports there are all unmodified again. Report on federal programs is unmodified. Here on page 17, you see your school, your various federal programs. And there are a couple small state programs. The big one, FEDES, that was COVID funds that came in, mostly used during the year. And then just other supplemental information that's required under the School Finance Act, reconciliation of your fund balances to your MEDMS reports, and a schedule of expenditures of federal awards as required by the Maine Department of Education. So that is I went over that quickly. So if there's any questions, let me know. I just try not to take up too much of your time. We do this presentation annually as is required by the Department of Education. Just gives me a chance to get in front of the board, let you have a question and answer period if you need it. That way the public can see that there's full transparency and whatnot. So
The COVID funding, Tim, do you do any of the audit of that, or is that a separate agency?
I'm sorry?
The COVID funding that we received prior to June 30 of last year, do you audit any of that, or is that a separate agency just to assure tracking, proper use of it?
We audit the ins and outs.
Yeah.
We don't audit the compliance.
Okay.
That would be done as part of the town audit.
Okay.
They'll do their federal compliance audit if necessary. If the total federal expenditures exceed $750,000, then the town needs to do the compliance audit.
Okay.
And then it's up to the auditor to select what programs they want. So we don't get into the deep compliance part of it. We just audit the ins and outs and as far as they're concerned with the Maine School Finance Act, but not the specific compliance of that particular program. Any other questions? As I said, it was, in terms of fund balance, you ended the year with a strong fund balance, showed a good increase. So that's a positive.
Any questions?
I know in the past we've talked a lot about the unfunded portion of that unfunded liability for the contracts, and you have been setting aside some money each year for that balance.
What is that at now?
The reserve is at 80,000. The actual liability at the end of June. 1 second, and I'll tell you what that was. $380,759. So just over 380. And again, that just has to do with the odd way that the contracts are written. Your year end is June 30th. Contracts run through August 1st, I believe it is. So there's always that extra pay period or two that are for that unfunded liability. And again, it's not typically an issue unless it ever comes to the point where there is no Madawaska School Department. You say, on any given year, June 30th, that's it. You still have that liability to pay those contracts out to the end. So that's the reason for that, potential unfunded liability. But
I don't hear any questions, Tim.
that's I definitely don't mind questions. So, but no, it's not a bad thing.
Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for helping us out with this.
No, I was happy to do that. So anytime there's questions or comments, feel free to reach out. So thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Yeah, administrator reports. You should have attached administrator reports, one for technology, one for facilities, and one for budget, I believe. If you have any questions, the administrators are here.
And just in Vince's report, Ben, I saw that there was a E-Trade, I think, project for Cat6 cabling in the MES, but is there anything similar to upgrades that are being done in the middle high school for technology, Wi-Fi, just to improve that area?
Yeah, Robert, we had bids put out for E-rate for both buildings to see what it would cost to upgrade the wiring in both buildings.
Okay.
The two bids did come in since the report was written. The low bid was awarded to Third Eye Global out of Fort Kent. So we filed the paperwork for reimbursement on that. That is the positive side of that. The negative side of that is the amount exceeds what we have in E-rate during this pay cycle. So we're going to look at other funding sources to possibly get that done. We have an idea where that may come from. Essentially, upgrading that wiring, the wiring in both buildings, the middle high school was done in 92, 93. The elementary school had their wiring done by Trellis Communications out of New Hampshire in 1994 when the school was built. Essentially, the only changes that have happened since were when new wiring was added by contractors. The majority of the wiring in the building is what's called Cat5. It tops out at 1,000 megabits per second transmission load. And the new Cat6 cabling does about 100 times that. So when we start having all these simultaneous Zoom sessions with kids inside of the buildings, and I mean, we see a definite impact on our networks when that happens. So we need to kind of future-proof the buildings, and we need to kind of look at how we're going to handle that infrastructure load moving forward. And that's one of the ways to do that. seems like I just talked to you 3 weeks ago, and it was 3 weeks ago, and still no change on the MLTI project. That's the main learning technology initiative with the devices for the students. At this point, they are evaluating all of the results that they have received, and there's a link in your report. You can see some of the questions and answers that some of the technology directors have submitted and superintendents have submitted to the Department of Ed, and the answers are written in plain speak. So we don't get all technical on the ifs, ands, and buts. I suspect that by the time next month's meeting comes to happen, we will know what their offerings are going to be, and I'll have a better idea of how we should be moving forward with devices. Right now, just so you know, grades 7 through 12 have 5-year-old laptops. These are laptops that have been used for 5 years every day by students and staff. They're just about done. Battery life has been greatly diminished. We've got some issues with teachers where the device just can't keep up with what they're trying to do with them. So we need to make a change for next year. I'll have some suggestions at next month's meeting, I suspect. Other than that, we had an interesting thing happen with our E-rate. E-rate is a federal program that reimburses us for certain telecommunications items within our school. And ever since, I believe it was 2005, we have had a contractor help us make sure that all of our I's are dotted and our T's are crossed, and we're using the right vocabulary and everything that we asked them for in that bidding. That goes all the way back to one year when we made a mistake in submitting our E-rate, and it held up about $24,000 for about 9 months before it got ironed out. And to preclude that, what we've done is we've hired an E-rate consultant. They take a look at what it is that we're looking to do, and they make sure that it's spelled out properly in all the forms. Everything is proper so that there shouldn't be any questions on our submissions. The company that we've been working with the last 8 years was a company called Education Consortium out of Pennsylvania. Education Consortium got a hold of me a little over 2 weeks ago. And they said, the person that used to take care of your account is no longer taking care of your account, and we'll get somebody right on your case right away. And so my alarms started going off, and I did a little investigating on my own, and it turns out that that company was having a major upheaval, and I smelled something a little funky going on there. I trust the person that's been handling that. That person has gone out on her own, started up her own consulting company, and we have since signed on with her to do our E-rate filing. And as a matter of fact, as of last Wednesday, we got approved for the 3 projects that we are looking to do next year. So we do have a change there. I don't think that is going to have any financial impact. I don't think there's going to be any problem with our filings or anything along those lines. If anybody's got any questions.
Yeah. No,
I think that pretty much covers the stuff. Oh, and Channel 16. Channel 16 got a new machine in there to handle their titling and the live events you're going to see in the next few months. When we do have live events, that they're going to have some additional capabilities that they didn't have before. It's going to be really nice. Okay.
Thank you, Vince.
Thank you, Vince.
Absolutely.
Is Paul there?
All is here.
Yeah, I saw in his report that he doesn't have N95s or enough N95s. Is that still an issue? Or are you okay? Because I know at Board Review, I had Nick look into half masks. It's a reusable respirator that maybe you can get your hands on, fit test, and it might help you with your N95, supplement your N95s.
We were able to secure some from the hospital at pretty much at cost, so.
Yeah.
We're all in that department.
Well, if you want to look into something reusable, Nick has some information on that too. He can get for you.
Okay.
Thank you, Robert.
Anybody else? Stacy, you think you're off the hook? Okay, so we move to committee reports. Negotiation update. So on the ESP side, which are your custodians, drivers, secretaries, cafeteria, and ed techs, we have wrapped up the language at the last meeting. And we began with the financial considerations. So that's moving along quite well. With the teachers, if you recall, we did the language last year, excuse me, and we had a memorandum of understanding for the financials for this year. So with the teachers, we've met a couple of times and we have settled on a financial package, which you're going to discuss later in your executive session. So if you approve it tonight and ratify it, the teachers will then also ratify at their membership meeting. So that's where we're at. Thank you. You're welcome. And the policy committee.
We have 3 policies for you to consider. 2 of them are new policies, and one of them is a working draft of our current graduation policy. The first one I'll start with is employee use of social media, social networking. You currently have a policy GCSA, which is your general policy for computer use in the district. This would be an add-on to that, so that hence the -S in the code. It's specific to social media use by employees. And it just outlines the fact that as staff members, you have your right to express yourself in social media, just like any other American does. But as a school district employee, there are expectations of you as being role models and being professionals that we want staff members just to be aware of. And for us, it's primarily to try to be proactive in trying to adjust, trying to avoid situations that may come in the future. As we all know, for those of us who are social media users, people can be very opinionated on social media, and people can react very differently to certain individuals' thoughts and beliefs. And I know that sounds like a big surprise, but that's essentially how things work today. So the heart and soul of this policy is the guidelines that are numbered on the pages number 1 through 11. It essentially just lays out the expectations for employees, discouraging employees from friending students and that type of thing on social media, reminding employees of their professionalism as a Madawaska School Department employee, and trying to be as proactive with that as much as possible. We're not saying thou shalt not use social media. We're just trying to provide some guidance on the appropriate way to use social media. And just so you know, when you look into law about school employee use of social media and any lawsuits that have happened in relation to that, there's always the argument of, is it a First Amendment right, or is it or does it impede on the schools providing education? So anytime somebody's First Amendment rights, I can say this on social media because I have the right to say this, if it impedes our schools to function normally and provide education, that actually trumps your First Amendment rights. You do not have the right as an employee to mess up our school day because of something you said on social media, essentially. So that's the heart and soul of it, and we're just trying to get our employees informed about that. The reason you see some red ink, red font, is because we did adopt from another school district. Your SAD 33 and 27 also have the same policy, so we just replaced that language with Madawaska School Committee throughout the policy. This is just the first read, so it's for you to take with you and go over, and if you have concerns, bring it to the second read, and we'll hopefully approve it at that time. Any questions on that one? The second one we'll go over is staff gifts and solicitations. Again, this is just another proactive measure by the school department trying to foresee any potential problems that could happen surrounding staff gifts and solicitations in school. So this one outlines, the guidelines around gifts from parents and students, gifts from businesses, gifts from staff members to staff members, and we'll always allow for staff members to, collect money for a bereavement gift, collect money for a baby shower. This policy does not end in that, but it does say that, it's not appropriate for you to buy your boss a silver necklace for National Teacher Day or whatever. So we're trying to, establish those boundaries, not end the practices that we've always done in the school district to help our fellow colleagues. That stays. Under solicitations, it does prohibit, businesses from coming into our school to try to solicit funds, and it also prevents our employees for soliciting not only funds but signatures. If there's a general election, I'm going to go around school and ask for signatures. That's going to interfere with our school day, and that's to be frowned upon. So again, we don't have this policy in place, but it's a good idea to have something to set the standard.
We'll be going over second read on this next time.
Yeah. And then the last one is your graduation requirements. The current policy in place was developed when all the school districts in Maine were moving to a proficiency-based diploma. And so it had transition language moving from past practices to current practices. Since then, we've decided as a district here to not have students earn a proficiency-based diploma. So I'll just, for those of you who maybe not be aware of that law, the proficiency-based diploma law said that in order for a student to graduate and get their diploma, they had to be proficient in all 8 content areas and in all standards in those content areas. And that's a lofty goal, to say I'm proficient in all content areas in all. So a lot of schools that did a lot of work in proficiency rethought that, and we're one of the school districts. And we said, you know what, we like our credit-based system where you need to earn X amount of credits, but we're gonna do our good work with proficiency and say what you do in order to earn proficiencies in class will earn you credits for that course. So the language you see struck out on page 1 is that language specific to a proficiency-based diploma, which we're not awarding. We're still awarding a credit-based diploma. It has transition language. The students in these classes will do this. The students in those classes will do that. That's been struck as well because now every student is going to be on the same system. So that's why you see in part 1 at the bottom, class of 2021 and beyond will follow this this policy, and it still outlines all your credits on page 2. English language arts is 4 credits, math is 2, social studies and history. So it outlines it, but it says demonstrated by proficiency. So Wayne explained this a while ago in our meeting before this meeting. Essentially, let's say in an Algebra 1 course, you might have 8 standards that are addressed in that course of study. And the students must maintain a 2.5 average of all of their credits. If they maintain the 2.5 average or better, then they get the credits for the course. If they're below that, then they need to, perform some remediation in order to bring that score up to a 2.5. So one standard I might have a 3, another one I might have a 3.5, another one I might have a 2. As long as it averages at the end to 2.5, then you get the credits. The only other changes, there are some changes in Part C, where we're no longer requiring additional fine arts, additional PE credits, but we are adding at the bottom some general remaining credits are going to go up to 5. So the graduates would have earned what, Wayne, 24 credits? 24 credits to graduate. On the following page, you see a lot of things struck out. That's because that was the transition language to get to a PBE diploma. We're not doing that. We're not earning a PBE diploma. And then everything else after that remains the same. So again, I just recommend you go over it and take a look and ask questions for next time. And we'll,
this year's senior class, they submitted transcripts with proficiency-based grades, or can you remind me of that again?
Wayne will remind us of that.
What's the question again?
This year's senior class, how is it working for them?
The same way it's currently laid out right now. The seniors this year are earning, they're working on proficiency, so they're looking for proficiency on standards. If they maintain a 2.5 average or higher, as Mr. Sirway indicated, for their course, then we award the credit for the class. So going forward right now, everybody is in proficiency. We're well onto the credit aspect of it because we think that was important. But in order to earn those credits,
So the transcripts that they sent to their colleges, university they applied for, had a proficiency grading system attached to it.
It'll have a lot of language on a conversion between the two, because we do have a lot of schools that are in both worlds. So it'll have a conversion of what this means in this grading system and what this means in proficiency. Any questions? Just so you know, 2.5 is it's a little bit lower than proficient, but in the past, in order to pass a class, you had to have an average score of what to pass a class?
7.
A 7, which is a D minus.
D minus minus.
I say the standard is set much higher now than it was in the past.
Yeah, and I would add to that even when we were doing the Carnegie system, everything was promulgated down to a GPA. So when we were doing the Carnegie system, at the end of the day, at the end of their senior year, they had a GPA of 3.0, 3.25, 3.5, or whatever it is. And that's exactly the same thing we're doing with the standards. At the end of the day, at the end of their senior year, they're going to have a GPA of 3.0, 3.25, or 3.5.
So is there any feedback from our guidance team on how their communication with universities as they were helping students apply for school and how that went? Was it clean across the board? Was it easy for University of Maine system? Maybe more difficult for outside of University of Maine systems? Does our guidance team have any feedback on that as they're helping this senior class right now find school placement for the fall?
What I can tell you, Robert, in our experience over the past years of going through this muddy times, the universities are accepting so many different things from so many different countries and states, and it's all over the place. So the way that the guidance department, really has that presentation of the material with an explanation of what these means everything, and then they can compare Madawaska students to Madawaska students, which, essentially colleges have always looked at what a Madawaska high school graduate, when we accept them. So you remain or no, they take a lot of our students, and they're able to see historically how our students have done and then translate to how these students are doing, to compare those apples to apples. The university is not having a hard time distinguishing, a successful from Madawaska High School, regardless of the system.
It's been a seamless transition, and that goes with scholarships, with everything else that we're doing. There's been no hiccups. The students haven't missed out on anything. As Mr. Sirwest said, when they go off to college, transition has been extremely seamless. We're not seeing any changes from what we were doing in the past to what we're doing now with regards to getting kids to go to college and they're achieving success when they get there.
Any other questions?
When they're getting there, are they getting into the programs they want?
Absolutely. We still have students that are going into engineering, going into physical therapy, going into law school, going into the medical field. None of that has changed. There's been no drop off. And they want to go, as long as they're doing the work, putting in the work at school like they always have been in the past, they're getting into all the colleges that they want to get into.
Ready to move on? Items of old business. Valley Unified Education Center.
I just wanted to give you all an update that we did take parts 11 to 17 of our interlocal agreement. We took that to the Valley Unified Board of Directors last meeting, just to go over the language to see if there was any concerns. And as you can see in your packet on page 7, there was only one suggestion brought up at the meeting when we went over for items M and N. Under section 16, authority to borrow working capital and authority to bonding authority and eminent domain powers. There was the suggestion that because these deal with financing and it's, you know, these are big decisions, it was suggested that perhaps these should be a 7/9 vote under the current governance. So I did say that I would take that back to you, and we're just going to continue to collect information on what the board members say.
Shared services.
And I did want to update you that the Lucy presented the Valley Unified budget to the 8 members in attendance on Monday, March 15. And the board of directors approved the budget by unanimous vote, which also solidified our shared services. So there was no contention to any of that. As Lucy presented, there's actually a $3,400 savings in the Madawaska budget under Valley Unified, and that's because of some shifting numbers. SED 33 actually increased a little bit on the student enrollment and valuation side, brought their percentage a little higher, and brought Madawaska's at 27 a little lower. So there were some savings for Madawaska in the budget.
That's the 2 funding.
And that's a mistake that was actually covered under my superintendent's report.
Okay.
Yep.
Couple of items of new business. Retirements,
We do not have any retirements.
resignation.
We do have one resignation. I did share with you the letter in advance, and please accept this letter as my formal resignation as my position as high school special education teacher at Madawaska Middle High School. My last day of employment will be on May 21st. But if that was amended, or is this the amended date, or?
The 21st is
the correct date? Okay. The original letter had a different date. This is not an easy decision to make, as my years at MMHS have been a rewarding and wonderful experience. I greatly appreciate the opportunities the school has provided me with, as well as professional guidance and support to allow me to grow in this role. I would sincerely miss my position and my colleagues, the school community, and most of all, my students who I've come to know and love. However, with recent changes at MMHS, it would be hard to pass up an opportunity to step into a new career. I will miss teaching greatly. However, my new position will allow me to focus on ensuring that children with disabilities have access to services that will improve quality of life and overall happiness, which is the part of the job that I love the most. As this has always been a goal of mine, I feel that this is the right time to move to a new challenge and opportunity. Finally, as my building administrator, I would like to thank you for all my support, encouragement, help, and guidance that you have given me during my time here at MMHS. Sincerely, Amy Oliver.
Do I have a motion to accept Amy's resignation? Oh, Nick, moves. Mindy seconds. All those in favor? No transfers for them? New hires, none, current openings.
So we do have current openings. We have a PE health teacher, that's Mr. Gerard's position, a fourth grade teacher, Ms. Diane Bagel, guidance secretary, Ms. Sonia Tardif, special education teacher, Amy Hulbert. As I explained to you, we've allowed for a current teacher to take an extended leave of absence next year to raise her twins. So this is going to open up a 1-year second grade position, which Lise and Giselle and I feel that we're going to be fine to move that person into another position because we have other retirements on the horizon. So that position is open, and then English art teacher, Lisa Welch's position. So we have some openings.
Yes, we do.
And right now, I know Lisa's conducted some interviews for the elementary positions, and Wayne is lining up some for his as well. So hopefully we'll get a few more applicants to roll in so we can have a good pool of candidates to interview.
Great. Spring sports guidelines and approval.
So I did provide you the MPA softball, baseball, and tennis recommendation guidelines. Not a whole lot of breaking news here compared to what happened in soccer and most recently what happened in basketball. The highlights are because these sports are naturally social distance type sports. You picture, athletes on the baseball diamond, they have more than 6 feet, except when a runner's going by. Tennis, you're across your opposition, unless you're playing doubles, you're a little closer. But these sports are considered moderate risk sports, and because they're moderate risk, they're recommending regional play, but not mandating regional play. They're saying, if you want to cross your region into another, that's fine. So there will be a playoff for sports this year. They will have a regular playoff system. And I think given the nature of the sports, I think we're fine to participate in that. The regional play, the regular season will be regional as we normally would. Spectators are going to be whatever the governor has in place. So right now, 75% permitted occupancy. May 24, that's 100%. So we're going to have fans. The fans are going to have to wear their face coverings. So will the athletes, so will the officials, everyone on site will have to wear face coverings. So my recommendation to you is to approve these spring guidelines.
Do I have a motion? Louis approves, Louis motion, sorry. Do I have a second? Nick? Any discussion? All those in favor?
Yeah.
Spring coaches, varsity softball.
So for varsity softball, Wetmore and Wayne Anderson are recommending both Hannah Neto. Hannah would be the head coach and Desiree Belanger as the assistant coach for the girls varsity softball team. The reason we're going with assistants this year is with all the protocols in place, it's going to be a lot of work for one coach to make sure that the athletes are following all of the protocols. So we're in a good position with our budget. Given the fact that we didn't have a girls varsity basketball program, there's some funds there to be able to provide assistant coaches. So that's the recommendation for varsity softball.
Do I have a motion? Mindy moves. Do I have a second? Louis? All those in favor? Any discussion? All those in favor? Varsity baseball.
The recommendation for varsity baseball is Mike Taggett as the head coach and Tom Gerard as the assistant coach.
Do I have a motion? Nick moves. Do I have a second? Mindy? All those in favor? Middle school softball.
The recommendation for middle school softball is Katie Sear as the middle school girls softball coach.
Do I have a motion? Louis? Motions. Nick, second. All those in favor? Middle school baseball.
And that recommendation is for Tristan Sear as the boys middle school coach.
Do I have a motion? Oh, everybody. Mindy moves, Nick seconds. All those in favor? And the tennis coach?
And for tennis, the recommendation is for Dean Jeanreau to coach both the boys and the girls varsity tennis.
Do I have a motion for tennis coach? Louis, sorry. Louis moves, Nick seconds. All those in favor? And it's your turn, Lucy.
Okay. Robert, did you get my email?
I did. Thank you, Lucy.
I like keeping the forestry industry working. When you're looking at numbers, you gotta look on paper.
Yeah.
So what you'll have in front of you is just our first draft. I like to, we have the gentleman on the Zoom. Is not here. He's on Zoom, or should be. Do you have Gary on Zoom?
Gary is on Zoom. Gary, you got the documents right? Yeah, okay, he's got them. Yep.
So what I'll start with is the one that has the legal size. So for the ones that are looking at the PDF version, the super summary by article. So that first sheet just basically a
Super
snapshot.
Which one again? Super summary by cost center?
Yeah, it's a one pager
Super
and it's,
summary by article.
or by cost center.
Like I got, yeah, by Carson.
Yeah, do by cost center. So this is basically just your quick overlook, and the Department of Education requires me to report the budget and to build a budget in a certain format. And I have to report it to the Department of Ed in 11 specific cost centers. So your first cost center is regular instruction. That's the one that includes your regular classrooms, your what happens in the classroom in each school. It also includes gifted and talented. The second cost center that we have to break down is the special education department. So anything to do with special ed that is not part of the federal program that's covered through our regular budget belongs in the second cost center. The career and technical education one is, it used to house whatever happened at the St. John Valley Tech Center. But now that the St. John Valley Tech Center has its own ED 279, this cost center would be if we needed to supplement over and above what the funding is that they receive specifically. And right now we're not supplementing anything. The fourth one, the other activities, that's your co and extracurricular sports and committees and your math team and those kinds of activities. So that's all reported under Article 4. The student and staff support includes your guidance, your library, your teacher trainings, your informational technology support, instructional technology, and your assessments. So your NEWA testing is going to be under this. So anything that is used to support the classroom or special ed or the teachers in general, that's not part of the classroom itself. System administration includes your superintendent, your central office, your board, those costs. School administration is your school office, so your principals, your vice principals, your school secretaries. Student transportation is anything to do with your busing and delivering students to and from school. That's it. So if you are purchasing a bus, if you're purchasing anything to any transportation related costs for pupils. Facilities maintenance is maintaining your buildings and grounds. That includes all your custodians, custodian supervisor and whatnot. And the school lunch program is this article. I'm showing the school lunch program in its entirety in that cost center. However, when it comes to the budget that we go to the town for, this would only reflect the amount that we're asking the locals to cost share. So in this first snapshot, I'm including all costs, and continuing education is basically the adult ed program. So when we, as our first draft, the first column shows what we had in the 2021 budget year. So we had a budget of 7,809,727. And the line below it, I've got without continuing ed and school lunch. So if those are standalone and they're funded entirely from other sources, the budget that would be left with would be 7,286,000. So that's in the current year. Next year, this first draft, I'm currently at 8,043,770, which is about an increase of about 234,000 to the budget, about a 3% increase. And without continuing ed and school lunch, it's about an increase of 231, again, 3%. So that's my super summary. It's our quick look. And it allows me to see, are we completely off base? And we're creatures of habit, and unless you have a really high increase of students or decrease of students, I would expect to be in the same room from year to year, unless you change. Say with COVID, we've had to supplement and separate every classroom in two, and you needed twice the amount of staffing. I would anticipate a really high increase, but normally when you keep about the same amount of students and teachers, you should be in the same ballpark. The next sheet is, I then look at it and I group it.
Real quick, Lucy, just for the regular instruction, I know there's a difference of 32,000. Is that some of that because you have 6 teacher openings and you've estimated a kind of a middle ground of retirements and then at a higher wage scale and then bringing some people in at maybe a mid wage scale? Is that?
It could be some of that. It could be someone retired and I'm anticipating someone coming in at an average rate. Or in this instance, I know for sure that I had one teacher in particular that I was reporting under regular ed, but really is a special ed teacher, or that we've changed their, either maybe we moved a teacher to federal programs or something like that. It's more than likely either a retirement or a reduction in cost of salaries, or a movement of a staff member in another section of the budget.
To maximize funding in those areas.
Yeah. We have to be really careful with the special education one. There's a requirement as part of the special education program, what they call maintenance of effort. Basically, from year to year, they expect the school district to contribute the same amount per student or no less than the amount that they have this year towards next year's. So if you have the same amount of special ed students, they anticipate that you would fund the same amount that you would or more. If you have a decrease in number of students, then you have to justify why your amount decreased. And typically it's usually a loss in students or a change in number, but you have to maintain the maintenance of effort or it affects your funding for your federal programs. The next sheet, what I do is I take the entire budget and then I group it in types of expenses. So I group all my salaries together. I group all my health insurance, salary benefits, and the different categories such as professional contracts.
Are you in some summary of grouping or expanded summary of grouping? Which one are you in now?
I'm now probably summary by group.
Summary of
By group or by grouping. It's still a one pager, and so that allows me to see. So when I'm looking at my salaries, my health insurance, and my salary benefits, so your FICA, your retirement, your workers' comp, that kind, 77% of our budget is in those 3 groupings. So that tells me that there's very little flexibility in 77% of that budget, unless someone leaves or someone, if you increase the flexibility in salaries and benefits is typically governed by your collective bargaining agreements. We can't just decide to pay someone $20,000 less because we don't have the funds or whatnot. We really have to. That's a critical piece of your budget that you have to maintain.
So you have, I think we have health insurance numbers. Is that correct, Lucy?
What I have is they've reported based on what the maximum increase will be. They haven't given us our specific numbers for this district for this year. I anticipate that sometime in early April. But the maximum increase is set at 4.2%.
Okay,
for Anthem Blue Cross. I
okay.
have,
You have a 8.7% increase, so you just went high on it? Or-
no, sometimes it's a change in, say you had someone that got married or someone that had a baby.
Okay,
Their level of insurance may have changed throughout the year. So
okay,
what I do is I look at everybody's, what they actually have as a level of contribution. And then I anticipate that if someone had left and we were gonna hire someone new, I have to plan as if they may have a health insurance because we have to offer it.
Sure.
Again, I have not yet done the full detailed analysis of each line. This was my first draft, and then we started digging deep. Some of the increases that you'll see are in materials and supplies. This budget is actually fairly difficult to create this year because of last year's COVID numbers. I build a budget, and I call it my Scrooge budget. I look at the past, the present, and the future. The past is something that informs me of, what level of service do we have, what did it cost. The present is, what are we doing different than we were doing last year? What are we doing that we're either going to continue or not continue? And the future is, what do we think it's going to look like, and what do we want to continue, and what's that going to cost? When I'm looking at the past, I can look at 2018 and before, and 2019 and before, and really have a good sense of what does it cost from year to year. But last year, from March to June, was a really unusual. We didn't have sports, we didn't have, we had to do social distancing. And then this current year, we had a lot of remote teaching. So what it highlighted in some fashion is, what do we need to do to our buildings to maintain what we may still have to continue next year? We know that the majority of our staff is likely going to be vaccinated, but we don't anticipate that our students are. So will we have to go to remote teaching? Likely. This pandemic is not likely to be going in September, so I have to anticipate that we'll have a very similar year than we had this year. What does that mean? It means a lot of Zoom, bandwidth, all of the technology has to work. We were very fortunate to be where we were in March of last year because we were able to turn around like this. We have to make sure that we can still be able to provide that level of service. So the budget aspect of it really forced me to look at, what's our infrastructure, what's our technology, our cabling and our technology equipment and whatnot. We do have a lot of federal funds that have come in. However, we have to apply for those and be approved before we can count on something being under those funds. And right now we have two really large pots of monies that are still a lot of unknowns. So some of the items in this budget are placeholders because I really don't know if we're going to have to cover it in this budget or if we're going to have to cover it. We're going to be able to cover it under the new ESSER funds.
Do you not have secure guidelines on how to use that money yet, or is that still being shaped?
Well, even though we have guidelines, everything has to be tied to COVID.
Yeah.
And what I can tie to COVID and what the feds will accept as being tied to COVID are two different things. There's some things that we thought were a shoo-in that we were refused in the first round or two. And also, it also depends on what you feel as a board will be an important part, because we don't have infinite amount of money. You'll likely prioritize certain things, and there may be things that we still need to do that might have to go in the budget. So right now, I've got some placeholders in here that need to be covered. There's some lighting retrofits. There's a lot of software because the teachers have had to really redefine how they deliver instruction. What you deliver in front of a classroom of kids now looks different as to how you're delivering it when half of your classroom is sitting at home or with parents or whatnot. And a lot of our new instruction methods really rely on technology. We were able to fund vehicles with some of the funds that we received. We were able to buy, did you buy one or two buses? This year we bought one. We bought one. We were able to fund a bus through the CRF funds. We also were able to fund a pickup truck for facilities, and I believe a minivan. So we've taken some of the big chunk items that we will not have to fund through the budget that we were able to get. So it actually alleviates some of the fund that we'll be asking for the locals going forward one of the cautions that we've received from the Department of Education, the Finance Department, is although we can make a case for covering some things through the CRF funds, they said to be very careful in that it's not something that they look at in terms of future funding. So your transportation costs, for example, are funded through the ED 279 based on a funding formula. And the funding formula includes actual costs of what you spent in the prior year. So if I now take some of those costs and put them through a federal program, we won't receive funds based on those actual costs. So we have to be really careful. So we always, if it's used as a basis for funding, we're keeping it there. It's more important to get the future funds through the Department of Ed than it is to use those one-shot funds.
A good example would be funding a bus through COVID funds. You're not going to get your reimbursement the following year from the Department of Ed.
That's right. Any questions so far? The next sheet, revenues and funding, Robert. It's a legal size sheet.
Yep.
So what I then look is I've developed the expense part or the anticipated expenses. And then I look at all revenues, all sources of revenues, carry forward, tuition revenues from Grand Isle and from the unorganized territories. I look at the funds that are coming in through the ED 279. And this year there's a slight decrease of about 26,000 to this district. And you'll see those with the little red arrows, those are your state funding allocations. I look at any subsidy for adult education. Our lunch subsidy is really an unknown. It depends on how many meals we serve, how many we deliver and whatnot, and whether or not the parents are actually going to have to pay for meals next year, as opposed to getting them all free. Right now, we have an approval up until the end of September. That may change, it may be extended. We're not going to know that until probably in August. So what I've planned for nutrition is to basically status quo as to what we currently have this year. I look at if we have any sales or if we have any E-rate funds, those kinds of revenues. And the very last number that I plug in is what do we need from the local that's over and above what we get from the state. And that's in the blue in your sheet. And so what we go to get from the locals is your total local taxes. And last year that was, or this current year, that was 3,764,000. Next year, based on this first draft, I would be looking at 3,894,000, which is about an increase of 130,000 or 3.5%. And the last page, so Robert, that would be the one titled mill rate.
Thank you.
So if we were to go to the polls today, we would be looking at an increase of about 130,000 to the locals. And based on this current year's valuation, that would translate to a mill rate of about 11.62 for the education piece of the budget. And it would be a slight decrease in mill rate of about 0.36. So that just gives me a snapshot of, is this reasonable, right? And I still have a lot of analysis to do, and now we have to look at what we think we can get through the ESSER funds and what we need to fund through the regular budget. As we hire people, I factor it in. We do have a slight increase in salaries. We have enough in the budget so that we can negotiate fairly and be able to, have a straight-faced negotiation, that it's not preconceived on, hey, you're not going to get anything. That's their best guess. The other sheet that you have is just an expanded level of, I go by category. So and if you look at the first one that we looked at, that was by your super summary by article, those green lines, you'll find those green lines in the expanded version as well. And it just goes to show you in the expanded category. So in regular instruction, I have to report by grades 3 to 8. I have to report by grades pre-K to 2, grades 9 to 12, and gifted and talented. So I have to provide a very detailed budget to the Department of Education. But thankfully, you don't have to go through all, I think I have 89 pages of detail that is not even the salaries yet. So it would be very onerous to do it on a line by line basis, but by giving you a summary, you can get an idea. And if you need additional information, that gives you a quick snapshot of, which area has really increased and why. Again, I'm not asking for an approval today. We're not there yet. This is just your first snapshot and your first look at a budget.
Now, our next step is to see what in this regular budget can get sifted through ESSER 2 or ESSER 3. You may have noticed that, that equipment and furniture, has a high increase. And that's because, we are situating kids very differently now. There's a high likelihood that we can put, some of that through ESSER funds. We don't know right now, but we've got to look at what the needs are and then fill the applications. And if it does get funded through one of the federal funds, it comes out of the local budget, which will get that number down.
So as we move into the next budget meetings, can we have a little bit of that breakdown just to see, okay, yes, we're asking for, 30% more, but, we're forecasting.
As I go through the analysis, I'll put a note on the light items that I know you'll be targeting. So usually I look at anything that increases because I know you'll be asking. And then anything that has a big dip as well, I'll inform you of why that is or where that has been moved to. I also look at I'll give you a list of the big ticket items that are included, such as the LED lighting project and which buildings they're in and whatnot. So you'll get a snapshot of those as a whole, not just in which line it belongs in.
And then which one of those we need to just absorb on our budget, and which ones of those we can potentially get through CRF funds, right?
Correct, yeah. So because, lighting retrofit, I doubt I can tie that to COVID.
No, you're not. But I mean, there might be efficiency
Mask is
management.
over their eyes and they can't see.
Yeah.
No, the virus.
The landscape's the virus, yeah. So.
Thank you, Lucy.
You're welcome.
Okay, I need a motion to enter into executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA 4056D to discuss labor contract negotiations between the Madawaska School Department and the Madawaska Professional Educators Association. Do I have a motion? Moving motion, the second, Nick, and the time is 6:20.